And OO? Opening opposition.
Oh, sorry, yeah, Chris was speaking first, like for me, please. I wrote speaking second, I don't know.
CG?
Today I'm going to tell you about our two arguments, which are titled Think of the Children and The Rights of a Parent. Before that, I'll give you a quick definition. What do we mean by teach skepticism? Well, we mean mostly we will, like, in schools we would have like specialized discussions about, topics of society in general, and we will introduce what is like skepticism or critical thinking and emphasize that these things are important. Also, at schools we would encourage children to challenge at home what their parents are telling them and to discuss with them, have conversations so that they might, find something out. So, first point, think of the children. Our point is that we think that under our world, the children will have a better life. How? First of all, skepticism is useful. We think that skepticism should be like everywhere. Schools should teach children to be skeptical of their parents, parents should teach children to be skeptical of their schools. We think that skepticism is a powerful tool. Why? First of all, it develops critical thinking. You can challenge an idea without just taking it for granted. Secondly, even if you don't change your mind about a specific topic, then it still encourages you to try things out, and the way you actually learn things is through trial and error. We think that this is the main learning mechanism. When you make a mistake in life, that's where you learn it. And we think that kids will be more willing to try things if they see that more things are being discussed and on the table.
Clarification.
No, thank you. Clarification.
So, for example, would schools act out in this in terms of policy? So, say if there's a subject choice issue, and the parents ask if the child is a certain subject, and the child wanted to do another subject instead, what way would the school listen?
The school would say, hey kid, you don't have to do what your parent says. Think about it, discuss it with them. The school won't enforce like, oh, you have to do the opposite. We're not advocating that at all. What also is good with teaching skepticism is that, skepticism may leak in any ways, with some ways, and we think that school is just a great way to teach skepticism. Because let's say that schools don't teach skepticism, then either there is no skepticism at all, which is negative because we don't get the benefits, or we have skepticism from some other source. What is that likely other source? We believe that this will be something like the internet, and we think that is something that we cannot control, that is something that is unreliable. Schools, we believe, are established places where we can do good things. And even if we have an evil school, then we can still have oversight and can fix these problems for those reasons. No, thank you. Secondly, why is it beneficial for a child? Well, the thing with children is that when you're born into this world, you didn't actually get to choose your parents. There's no actual selection process for being a parent. If you are a kid who was just dealt a bad hand, then that might really suck. And we think that schools would be like the safety net for you. Supposing you have a parent who just gives you really, really bad advice constantly, and you keep trusting that, we think that's a negative effect on your life in the end. So we need schools to help you with that. And even if your parents, even if your parents are super clever and can still manipulate you into doing their things, then at least the discussion will still broaden your horizons to realize that your parents, need to do some mental gymnastics to tell you what to do, right? The third thing we think that a child gains is independence. We think independence is the end goal of a child. When growing up, what you want a child when they become an adult is that you want them to be independent. Why? Firstly, independence is a very high predictor of success because you function in life if you do not have to depend on others, although you might. Secondly, you might be in danger of, if you feel too dependent on what your parents say to you, then you might get solutions that are dead ends. For instance, your parents might give you some very specific advice that has helped them in the past, how they have thought about the world, but that need not apply to you. Why? For instance, you have, you have individual issues. You might have, let's say, depression. You might have problems that your parents don't understand, and the advice that they are giving you may be actually harmful for you. And if you just take that for granted, then you will do worse in life. No, thank you. And we think that independence is key to breaking out. And under our side, kids will have more independence. They will get it faster because they will be taught it in school. We think that the later you gain independence, the worse off you are in life. So, all in all, we think that kids will do better. Yes?
Would you allow children to vote in elections or have guardianship over themselves? And if not, why?
We think that no, because they aren't fully autonomous yet. They aren't fully independent yet. Of course, we want to get them there as fast as possible. Let's say this program is a super good success. We can lower their voting age to 16. By all means, we can do that. But that's a separate issue. We're just talking about how to make kids better. Second point, the rights of a parent. First thing I want to emphasize is that as a parent, you do not fully own your child. You may fully own yourself, but you do not fully own your child. An example, you might want to imprison yourself. You can sit in your basement for as long as you like. No one will stop you. But you cannot keep your child in your basement as long as you like, because there is a difference between you and your child. Therefore, you do not have full control over your child. There is some kind of border. Now the question is, where does this border run? We think that the key to answering this question is asking ourselves, where does these rights originate from at all? Well, we say that why somebody else has rights over you at all is because a child is just not fully developed, it's not fully autonomous, doesn't have that full capacity to make the best choices. We think that children just need help in being alive, right? And the default person who could do that is the parent. And they are a very good default candidate because they have a maternal bond or whatever, and they also have a great interest because they're in the same boat and they care about the well-being of their family. However, we do make an exception. If a parent fails at being a parent, we do take action. For instance, if you abuse your child, we will take away custody. We see that in society right now. So the question is, so we can see that if you do your child a harm, then we can punish you for that. And the harm right now is, what they're doing is that these parents are obstructing the access to a child for knowledge or overview. They are biasing their thought and therefore taking something away from them. And we think that it is right for the states to give that back to the children, because the parents do not have a right to take this away. Even if I do not understand the law, I still have a right to have a copy of the Constitution when I am in court, right? Because even though I might not be the best person to make these choices myself, I should still be given as much information as possible. Lastly, we think that today's society is very developed, and we can in the past, yes, the parent was the only one who was maybe capable of childcare, but now we think that schools are very capable of also doing good for children. For these reasons, please propose.
I thank Prime Minister. I now welcome the Leader of Opposition.
Three things in this speech panel. First of all, we want to outline to you the worst case scenarios. Secondly, we want to tell you about why this disadvantages children's educational attainment. And thirdly, we want to talk to you about good relationships between parents and children, why they're so important, why this makes it worse. First of all, on worst case scenarios. I think the cases, first of all, of the parents who are the most controlling, the ones by their mechanism who they would want to have interference over, there were two reasons why this is very, very problematic. The first is children who are born into value systems where the parents want to put pressure on them to act like them, to believe what they do. It is probably beneficial for them to believe in those value systems, so far as that is what the rest of their entire community believes in. And therefore, from the hegemonic perspective of what is being put on them, it would be problematic for them to challenge those value structures, and it would lead to their lives being worse off. But more pertinently, I think it's very important to bear in mind that controlling parents will be the ones who will respond the very worst to this policy. They will not listen to what the children are coming and telling them when they come back with the idea that teachers have told them to challenge them. Rather, they will double down on that control. They will snap back at their children. They will give them less autonomy and less control because they fear what their children are hearing. But on the extreme end of that spectrum, the kind of parents who would be willing to go with this in most instances will have situations whereby children, as we'll explain, will abuse this system because many children, because they are young and inexperienced, will try and take advantage of this system and try and believe that they know best for themselves and things that are unenjoyable to do. They will say to their parents, I want to skip school, it's not for me, I no longer want to do my homework. And those parents, at the other extreme end of the system, will believe that that is ultimately something that they should do because they want to respect their children's autonomy because the state has now legitimized it. But also we say, even more in the cases of things like abuse and things like violence towards children by parents, we already have under status quo plenty of systems that encourage children to report that abuse to their teachers. That happens on both sides of the house. This makes no difference to that. So moving on now to educational attainment. We say the most important thing to bear in mind here is significant numbers of children, for whatever reason, be it that they have some issues that will come down from the fact they haven't been able to socialise as quickly as other children, they are somewhat struggling intellectually when compared with other children in the environment, or they have some kind of behavioural problems, often act out in school or act out at home. We think it's very problematic when parents are dealing with situations where they're finding it very difficult to raise these children, they're really finding it difficult to discipline and control them on a day-to-day basis, that you now have a situation where teachers effectively legitimize the behaviour of those children at home. When these children now act out, they can effectively say, I don't have to listen to you, my teacher said that this is okay, my teacher is a figure of authority, they know what's best for me, they tell me all of these things, why can I not do that? No thank you. So understandably, when parents have heard this of teachers, and they are going through the difficulties of trying to raise their child on a constant basis, day to day, they understandably feel disappointed and a sense of disrespect coming from those teachers. One, because they told them that they are effectively not good parents, that they shouldn't be listened to, and that these teachers who only see these kids a few hours a day for a few months of the year think they know what's best for their child, and not them, people who in many cases had to give birth to them, had to change their nappies, had to do all the sorts of things that were really difficult and hard for them. And now they have a situation where children are using this as an extreme. We think understandably it's also a case, another mechanism there is that they are now trying to encourage them to disrespect the value systems that those parents think are best for their children, and therefore that's an attack also on the mechanisms which they think would be good for their children. And also they do this with an information asymmetry in the minds of the parents, because the teachers don't know that much information about the parents when compared with the fact that parents live with these children on a daily basis. What are the impacts of that? First of all, communication with teachers breaks down. In many instances, educational issues or socialization issues actually can often only manifest themselves at school, because it takes children a larger school environment for those behavioural problems to act out, because they are around other children, the sensory issues that makes it difficult, they have more people to talk to, and they hit or are violent to other children in a way they wouldn't do around their parents. It's already very difficult to get parents to accept those things about their child when they don't see them. You make it so much more difficult at the point in which you've made the teacher-parent relationship much worse. But that is far more impactful in a variety of other important regards as well. Things like teachers trying to explain to parents what subjects they're good at. The fact, trying to tell them very difficult and uncomfortable things that they might not want to hear about their child. Things like, you know what, your child mightn't be able to go to college because they don't have this level of educational attainment. Your child might have a behavioural problem. Your child is bullying other children. These are things parents don't want to hear, and they need to respect those teachers to be able to believe that. But it's also going to make things like children helping with homework, parents helping children with homework, all that more difficult. One, because you now have caused parents to disrespect the educational system. But secondly, because you now have a situation whereby they see the relationship between children and parents are worse. Because it's now just that bit more difficult to have children sit down and do something uncomfortable they don't like homework, because they tell them it isn't good. But the funniest thing is, right, this will backfire on teachers in the classroom environment and increase classroom disruption. Why is that? Because you tell children that they can now disrespect and not do what the most important figures in their lives are. The people they have known since birth. The people they have grown up always doing what they have been told until they got to school. Children already act out comparatively more in school because, as they explained, the environment is a bit more chaotic, there are more children. They're going to say, well, if I don't have to listen to what my parents are saying, why do I have to listen to what you are saying, teacher? Especially now when they're because an important thing that parents always do is they tell their children to listen to their teachers at school. That is disproportionately now less likely at the point at which teachers are telling parents they should not listen to them. I'll take opening if they have something. Yeah,
why would traditional disciplinary methods fail for this approach? We can still punish them in ways that we, already use? Why is it
Yeah, because you still want your child, you can't constantly discipline your child. Eventually you want a point where your child's behaviour changes because they actually come to respect the authority of their parents and understand that they have their interests at heart. You can't just keep putting your child in the naughty step. You can't just keep grounding them. Eventually you want them to become a functional adult who interacts with you in a meaningful way. You make that process so much longer and harder, especially now when, for all the reasons I gave you, children and parents know less about their children. So relationships with parents as a third point. Really important here, right, is that the vast majority of cases, parents just do have their children's best interests at heart and have an information asymmetry over their children regarding what their children know about themselves, the subjects they are good at, what their behaviour is like, and also hindsight, what the world is like, what college is like, what relationships are like, what turning 18 is like, what doing all of these things in their culture is like. They know that. They can bring that and they can move them in certain ways. You break them that respect that children have for parents. You make, as they explain in their mechanisms, things like subject choices, things like college choices, be things that are now no longer in parents' control, even they though they are the best place to do that. But you limit the capacity for them just to respect them as individuals, to take their advice about things like where to live, how to have experiences like going out with someone or being in a relationship for the first time. This is comparatively impactful because schools are really badly placed to do these things because they're often underfunded, guidance counsellors are underfunded, and as I explained throughout this speech, schools have an information asymmetry about those parents, about the children when compared with parents. Couldn't be happier opposed, panel. Thank you very much.
I thank you, your opposition, and now welcome Deputy President.
So I think I just want to clarify what it is we're actually going for here. We're not going for disobey your parents at all times, at all costs. We're going for challenge them, and if they can't back up their orders or their explanations with an explanation that resonates, then you should perhaps challenge them. If your parents make a good point, then by all means, follow them. And what kid is going to turn down help for not getting in trouble for not doing their homework? They talk about how now apparently you will never be able to sit them down and focus on homework. Yeah, but if they don't do the homework, they will still get in trouble with the teacher, who we're not who so far we're not challenging. So getting free help with the homework that gets them not get in trouble seems like a pretty good deal. That's one example where if you can relate it to what the kid will still follow you. They're not just gonna respond to every question with "fuck you, Dad." So if you have a very controlling parent, as they talk about how these people really lash out if you challenge them, like if we're talking about people who get abusive or violent as a result of that, we have, as O themselves point out, child protective services for that. I think that's a little outside of this debate. No matter what side this motion falls on, you're still going to have people who are able to take away kids that are being abused.
Point?
No, thanks. And by all means, speaking of abuse, the previous speaker talked about how kids are now going to abuse this newfound freedom to do really stupid shit, or as I call it, experimenting to learn what works for them. That's a fundamental part of forming your identity as a child. Sure, the kid is going to make mistakes. We all do. And then they'll learn from those. So really, yeah, you're right. They'll probably fuck up on something. But I know I did. But that's okay. Because they'll learn from it and eventually become more fully formed adults who understand the world better. And they talk about how the kids are going to be violent and the parents can't stop them from doing that or getting in fights or trouble or whatever. Again, we still have the teachers to step on it. These teachers are never going to accept you getting into trouble while you're in school. And you can still win on showing that kids the value of the morals. You just have to raise ways to understand them. Now, I just want to point out that this education will likely be a gradual process. No matter what side this motion falls on, all teenagers are going to want independence, which is why parents dread that phase so much. What we're just doing is likely speeding up this process. And I want to touch on a point that was made by CO. Would you want kids to vote? Let me flip that question around. Would you want 18-year-olds who have never had a chance to form independent thinking and essentially are just 18-year-old kids? That's the other side of that coin. With this system, you can have them make some mistakes, learn some things, so they will actually be independent thinkers by the time they get to vote. So yeah, I would much prefer them having this independence, being able to act on that. Then they talk about this information asymmetry. Let me just note, first of all, parents never fully understand their own kids' worlds, no matter how much they would like to. And that's especially true in our age where technological change is accelerating and accelerating and accelerating. Like the apps I was using 5 years ago are irrelevant now. My parents have no chance of keeping up. So the world is fast moving and you're never going to be able to fully help them. Someone who is going to be able to help them is teachers, because while it's true that they don't have the depth of understanding that Will talks about, they have a breadth of understanding about tons of other kids that they can compare to. It's the comparison between understanding one kid really well or understanding 400 kids pretty well, and then being able to see patterns in it, predicting their behavior from that. So I don't think it's fair to say that the teachers just have no clue what's going on with the kids they're teaching. Then, as Carol also touched on, I just want to touch up a little bit more. Like biological love, which is what the rights of the parent stem from, right, is a really powerful force. But that also can be what leads it to becoming controlling. When we as humans evolved to have biological love towards our kids, the world was a riskier place, and there was less of a premium on independence. In effect, we are Stone Age humans applying our Stone Age instincts to the 21st century, and they don't work that well for these contexts. So I think challenging this idea of being of control that comes naturally to all parents on some level is a good thing, because the world has changed from when we as humans evolved. I'll take some closing.
Yeah, what do you think are the main reasons children today rebel and do extreme stuff during their youth?
I think it depends a lot on the kids and the context, but overall I will say that, like I said, rebelling and making choices and making mistakes are a natural form of you learning, of you getting experience that you can then act on once you have to stand on your own 2 feet, which both sides of this debate so far acknowledge is coming someday. Someday you won't be able to call mom and dad, and it's better that you make the mistakes while you still have a fail-safe in them than if you make them once they're gone. Now I want to touch on my own point of extension, which is demographic shift. Notice that we're placing this debate in developed countries, and in developed countries what tends to happen is an aging population, meaning that old people are already becoming increasingly powerful in the political process. It gives them more power already and takes away, by contrast, the political agency of young people. That's bad because old people tend to be short-termists, they're focused on their pensions and their consumption, and they're closed off to new opportunities and don't see the value of new technologies. Like, as an example of this, you can say that old people disproportionately voted for Brexit, they disproportionately don't give a shit about climate change because they're not going to be around for the fall. So they just care about the short-term parts. You can also look at things like cutting education and cutting student budgets. They're out of the system. Most likely their kids might even be too if they're old enough. So I got mine, so fuck you. And they just generally have bad long-term use of society's money. They vote for short-term policies. And if you make it so that old people or parents can win an argument with their kids politically as well, by virtue of them being parents and not by virtue of having good arguments, you will get worse policies overall and give them even more disproportionate power. That's bad because young people are the ones that will eventually be funding all of this. They are the ones who need to run things and that you need to invest in for the future. But that's not what old people are incentivized to do. And why you shouldn't give them more power than they already have, a power that's already growing as their share of the electorate grows. Overall, what we say, and I think, it wasn't quite being fair to this, we're not saying you should never listen to your parents. We're saying as you get older, you should increasingly weigh what the parents say on the merits of what they're saying, and not on the merit of them being your parents. Because you are getting older, you are becoming more independent, and you need to become more independent in order to eventually not need them, which should be the goal of every parent. Since we're streaming, given the topic of motion, I'll just say, hi Mom and Dad! Hang close on that.
Alright, I think the deputy prime minister, I now invite Deputy Durham.
Yeah, sorry. Firstly, I'm going to resolve this top half why it's clearly a win for O, and then I'm going to expand that how in many, many instances, schools and teachers do not have the best interest of their child at heart because of structural forces. Now, there are 5 things to address in terms of OG and what is going on at the end of this top half. The first thing is they say, this looks like parents being asked to justify rules. What is our response to this? First of all, children don't know what a justification looks like. This is because their worldview is narrow and they have an interest, I think, insofar as they want to not do work and to not, for instance, do things that are not comfortable for them, to reject any justification in light of a powerful message from their teacher that they should be able to do that. So I think insofar as there is not a teacher there to control that narrative at home when parents when children are asked to justify that you are likely to get this being quite antagonistic and not result in the kind of critical thinking they suggest. But secondly, I would suggest that parents don't have the time or the energy to constantly justify rules. You need to tell children all sorts of stuff constantly because they constantly do stupid things, like standing near the edges of buildings, like refusing to eat anything but waffles for ages. I did this until I was 12. What that means is that it is exhausting to constantly have to fight with people. This is particularly true if you have multiple kids or you are a working parent, because you don't have a lot of time with your kids and even you're often on edge and not in a position where you either want to or have the time to justify, especially in light of the fact that parents see this as an imposition in the way that Chris described. So they don't see that as they don't understand why they have to justify things when they know how they parent and they know it's good. I think even when they're not justifying things, I think they are still likely to have the best interests of their children at heart because they know that the safety and health of their children is important. This is true, I think, of almost all parents, almost all of the time. And for those parents who it is not true of, those parents are particularly controlling or particularly neglectful, I would suggest in the way that Chris outlined that this backfires and leads to worse outcomes insofar as they become more domineering, more controlling in the worst case scenarios, could pull their children out of school. So what that means is that for those kids who need the most to be able to listen to their parental authority, even if it's not justified, those kids, for instance, who have working parents, who perhaps come from more vulnerable communities, those are the children you let down the most in terms of this approach. Secondly, in terms of abuse, I think they mischaracterize our case on this. We do not suggest that this means that parents will just hit their children in all instances when that occurs, though I think that is an outcome in some instances. I think it does look like doubling down. This is the worst of both worlds, right? So for the parents who are very abusive, very controlling, they become more so, because it's not just hitting your children, it is, putting more pressure on them, grounding them, being more forceful in terms of perhaps traditional hierarchical value systems. For those parents who are likely to perhaps accept this or just think that it is stupid, I think that means that they are less able to, it just creates a level of resentment, and a level of resentment with teachers means you don't get the educational outcomes that we talked about. But secondly, insofar as that is a harm that happens in some instances, while we do think that there are mechanisms to report abuse and that sort of thing, they do expose that children to that harm insofar as that occurs more on that side of the house, and we don't think that is an acceptable impact for them to stand over, and it's not one we think that should be encouraged. Thirdly, to deal with this critical thinking thing, I think it's perfectly possible and indeed better to engage critical thinking skills in a manner that is not necessarily tied up with authority. Because insofar as critical thinking is important, it is to do with problem solving, thinking outside the box, engaging with concepts and problems. Authority itself is not necessarily the thing that must be challenged in that instance, and I think you being better able to do your homework, being better able to not fall behind in school, and actually dealing with things that are designed to encourage those patterns of thinking is a far better outcome insofar as that is being measured in this space. Fourthly, to talk about, to expand on our impact, I think in light of their quite narrow ones. Firstly, I think in the worst case scenarios, this does mean the parents pull their children out of school, don't support them with their homework, all that sort of thing. But the second thing is that worse relationships, especially at the early stage, children's discipline is worse, mean
mean that essential issues aren't identified. Chris talked to you about behavioural issues, but also these things like dyslexia, not going to parent-teacher meetings because you think that teacher is an idiot, and when you do, not listening to that teacher in that context, insofar as there is already a slight incentive for parents to want to imagine that their children are perfect. Now that is additionally amplified insofar as you give them an actual justification for that because they resent the authority of that teacher. Insofar as those issues aren't identified early, even if you suggest that perhaps parents have the interest of their children in heart, and in the long term, and once those issues become apparent, perhaps they might want to actually address them. If you don't give support for children with things like dyslexia, things like learning difficulties at early age, but even if they're just slightly behind, which is true for so many children, right? They fall behind, that effect is cumulative as they progress through education, because if you're behind early, it's very difficult to catch up later on, and if you don't, for instance, learn to deal with dyslexia and that sort of thing, it's very difficult to pay for it. I'll take it out.
Your entire case is based on the assumption that parents have the best interests of their child at heart. If that is true, why the fuck would you not go to your parent-teacher meeting if your child has dyslexia?
Well, because you don't respect the teacher, you have a slight incentive to not listen to them anyway, and you amplify that incentive. That is hugely important and does accrue the impact that we talk about. In terms of the information asymmetry, right, we accept that some teachers know some things about kids that parents don't. Parents know lots of things about kids that teachers don't. That means that communication is essential between those two actors to ensure that children are brought up to the best extent. Why then, in terms of new substances, do schools not have the best interest of their child at heart? The thesis of this argument is that in those instances where this is effective, the comparative influence of schools is likely to be far worse than parents. Firstly, in terms of minority children. Parents are often from the same background as their children, love their children, and want to see them succeed. Teachers are often not of the same background because minority groups within states oftentimes don't receive the college education that means they get to education, oftentimes are discriminated against in employment practices. But secondly, even if they are minority teachers, they are prejudiced by all the previous children that they have taught before, and they see, for instance, a black child in light of all the previous black children they've seen before, and therefore essentialize that child in light of the previous behavioral issues. What is the impact of that? Firstly, children are more likely to internalize the prejudice of their children. When they tell them they'll never succeed in anything because they've seen children before, and this is the thing that teachers do all the time because they're often exhausted, underfunded, or in other instances, racist. That means that children are more likely to drop out of school, not paying attention to class, not get out of high school diplomas, which are essential. Secondly, in terms of religious schools, the context here is in much of the world, parents are forced to send their children to religiously conservative schools, which are more religiously conservative than those parents themselves, because they're better funded and they have better academic outcomes as a result of a broad funding. In the status quo, those schools teach their parents to respect them. But now they will internalize conservative messages like, for instance, homophobia, for child children, all that sort of thing, and are less likely to expand the sort of critical thinking skills that we talked about. This is the worst of both worlds, and we're happy to condemn it. Thank you very much.
Okay, we are all now closing up on the
I think that OG wins top half, but I do think that top half has been one of the extremes, where OG say schools will do this fantastically, and then OO say, well, what if the schools are like religious enough values that they teach their kids to like throw chairs across the classroom? We're going to do two simple things in this extension. Firstly, I'm going to give an accurate characterization of why parents often don't treat the monopoly they have on their kids' minds fairly, and why they're likely to do a good job if we don't have this counterbalance. Part two of that is why schools are likely to do a good job of this. Secondly, we're going to talk about how this improves the parent-child relationship. And thirdly, I'm going to talk about the impact this has on the kids' ability to get a good education and to form themselves as a human being with views separate from their parents. Before that, two pieces of extraneous responses. Ronan says that kids don't know what rules are good for them. Maybe true at the start, but I also think that kids are not stupid and they have like basic knowledge about themselves. And so I think if you end up in a world where the kid goes to bed at 5 a.m. every night and then can't get up the next morning for school, the kid is going to realise realize that, and then just as easily, they are likely to trust the parent and not question them as much. If the parent truly knows what is best for the kids, and I think that is likely to come out eventually. Next, they say you're not going to pick up on things like dyslexia. I would just say that that's a medical condition, and I think that like parents have an incentive to not fuck their kids over if they really want what's best for them to the same extent. Next, they say religious schools will teach kids bad things. I think this is kind of just a wash, because I think if they go to a highly religious school, then they probably have like highly religious parents, and so probably like decide about how that's going to end up the same. Why are parents bad and schools good? Because OG would use a weird example of the kind of parents, like the kind of parents that will like lock their kids in the basement because they hate them or something. We're going to tell you why even a parent that is not a psycho will make mistakes, and why they are bad at having a monopoly on their parents. The premise of this argument is the home is tyrannical, right? You are there intensely in your formative years. The majority of the information and the relationships that you form come from there. You think they have an intense amount of control with you because you're literally stuck with them between four walls. Why then are parents quite bad at having control over their children? Firstly, because parents love their kids. They have biological instinct to protect them. So they are compelled to try and protect them from harm at all costs. But the problem with that is that they are not always, they are fallible, and they don't even sometimes realise like that the harm that they're describing isn't real, or that the solution isn't correct. This leads to overzealous application of parenting in a way that I don't think that teachers have, because they might care about the kids, but they don't feel this weird biological urge. Secondly, they feel like they're responsible for passing down traditions and social norms, because they might feel pressure from their family as well, whereas I don't think that incentive exists to the same extent with teachers. Thirdly, I think that they want to feel like they are a good parent, which means that they have a confirmation bias, that they are the person who knows their kid best, so they are doing a good job, and that the things they're doing are correct. But I would say that my mum is not the person who knows me best, although I think she wants to believe that she is. I also think that they are likely to think that their kid is unique and special, because they want to believe they're doing a good job. Lastly, I just think that this is trivially true, but your parents tend to be older than you, and so their views and values are likely to be different from yours. This is why you need a counterbalance to the monopolising effect that parents have on their kids. Why then do we think the schools do a good job? Firstly, because the school has an incentive to regulate itself. If it's true that parents can pull their kids out and complain, then I think you have an incentive not to be like, yeah, John, it's fine to like throw a table across the room, because that also makes your life harder. Teachers don't want to get pulled into the head's office of complaining parents, so I think they are likely to do this in a sensible way. But I would note that in the home there is no higher authority like being pulled into your boss's office, right? Because unless you are openly abusing your kid, the kid can't complain to the government like, oh, I think my dad's a bit of a dick. Whereas I do think that there is some kind of like levels that this has to go through with schools. But next, I think there is more likely to be a broad range of views, like different teachers and different role models. Even if it is a religious school, you are likely maybe to have somebody who is slightly less religious, or slightly more religious, or in a different sect to your teachers, whereas the home is literally just like probably two parents, maybe one, and so you get less of a diverse range of views. But I also think that planning and regulation is going to go into this, like curriculums are literally planned in advance, whereas you don't plan individual actions with your kids, and nobody teaches you to be a parent, so I think you're more likely to fuck it up. Lastly, I think that teachers are often parents themselves, and they have to teach these kids, so you literally don't win if you teach them to be as rebellious as opening opposition tells you they will. Why then, considering that frame, does this impact the parent-child relationship positively? Because I think that kids are rebellious in the majority of cases that we have to deal with in this debate, right? Because they are individuals just as much as adults, and they want to be able to assert themselves. I think we all know on a trivial level that it is true when you feel like you are being controlled and you can't assert yourself and your individuality and your individual needs and your individual wants. This means that I think that when they are stuck under four walls and they can't assert themselves, they are likely to act out. I think when kids can't negotiate with their parents over small things like bedtime, importantly though, I think that they will push for larger things like staying out late and rebelling in more toxic ways, because they know that if they come to their parents and say, I want to have a negotiation with you about what kind of dinner I eat, and the parent is just going to say no, then you're likely to go for higher things like sneaking out at night, because you aren't able to like have that release valve to like be able to assert your individuality. This means I think you end up doing worse stuff like drinking, going AWOL, bunking school and stuff like that. But also I think even if you don't do that, you oppose your parents in unconstructive ways, like yelling at them and telling them that you hate them. Why is this bad? Because one, trust is violated if you break your parents' rules all the time, but secondly I think it creates a terrible atmosphere where you try constantly to talk to your parents and then you get frustrated and then you end up yelling at them. I think this breeds future resentment and you blame all your problems on your parents, even if that isn't necessarily the case. How does this change? Firstly, I think that kids can teach them that it's an acceptable thing to do, but they can also teach them how to do it well. They can talk to them about what is and isn't a fair issue to bring up with your parents and what the pros and cons of staying up until 5 a.m. might be. But I also think they can just do some like basic negotiation stuff, like how do you approach a conversation in a constructive way in order to be able to get what you want. I don't know how exactly this works, but diplomatic training is a thing, and I think that this is something which schools has an incentive to do to avoid the harm that O described. Sorry.
You expect that schools who teach diplomatic training are not just going to be effective in teaching that to children, but also that those children will then be able to teach that to their parents. They're 5 or 6 years old.
Not all kids are 5 or 6 years old. Obviously, we do this in a smart way. Like maybe a 5-year-old will be able to say, "Hey, Mum, I don't like broccoli." Maybe a 16-year-old will be able to do like something else. That was a really weird clear one. Cool. So yeah, I think that they can teach them in a way to do that it's constructive, which improves the parent-child relationship. This leads to better relationship support structures. This is important because this is the longest relationship you'll ever have, and I think it's important that it doesn't go to shit. But the impact of this also is I think you're going to be nicer to your kids in the future, because I think if you teach a child that their parents' authority was not absolute, then they are more likely to buy the idea that their authority is not absolute. And so I think on our side of the house, the need for this motion is diminished over time, because you break the spell that parents know best and absolutely know what's best. I also just think that if you're a kid and you resent your parents, you are more likely to resent your school, because you don't think that school, because you think that school back to your parents and you just see them as people who have authority over you. I think in a world where they teach you that it's okay to vent your individuality, you're more likely to pay attention in class and get the kind of educational attainment Owen wants to talk about, propose.
Right, I thank that speaker, very nice speakers, please keep eye before the bell. With that being said, I invite the next speaker, Member Thompson.
I came from a religious house. For my luck, me and my parents had our fights, had our clashes, but it was over a progress, over time, with mutual respect, once we both changed until I became what I want and they became what, and they stayed how they want. We think that on government's world, the chance that I, like other friends that I have that are not that lucky, would be in a big clash, that I would leave my house sooner, that I will feel resentment to them until this day will be a lot greater. We think that the amount of children who will fight with their children, who will leave, who will use more drugs, will go to other authority figures like criminals or people that affect them bad, is a lot greater than in the status quo, and we think it is just bad. I'll have 2 points. First of all, how it is likely that children are actually going to understand this message, okay, and react to their parents, because obviously this was a big clash in that. Because if it's going to be, they're going to talk with them rationality and just understand the parent's side most of the time, of course governments win. But if it's more closer to what we said, that most of the time they have a conversation and just think that the parents doesn't listen to them, they don't care about them, that they should have let them, it's going to be worse. And secondly, how exactly is going to make more clashes between parents and children. But first, couple of points of rebuttal, because CG tells us a couple of things. It tells us, parents really want to help their children, and they think they are right, and they think they're doing the right thing, and a lot of times they have big norms, and they will want the children to do it. We think this happens on both sides of the house. On our side of the house, a lot of the time this comes through authority. So we're talking when the children listen, even if he doesn't like that, a lot of the time just does what the parents want. On their side, it is more likely that parents will have to use a lot of force in order to stop it, by not giving them money, by grounding them, by just not giving them the car so won't be able to go to the party. We think that it's going to happen anyway, but a lot worse. Secondly, they tell us schools are a lot better, they are a lot less extreme, they are not going to stuff it to the children's faces. First of all, they've never been in a school. Usually schools are a lot more extreme. Why? Because there's a lot of children and they have to make rules that will help all of them. It means that when they tell you about rules, about religion, about everything else, they're usually giving you the worst case scenario or the most extreme one, because they can't really tell you what you are going to get better. Rather than your parents who knows you and knows when they should let you loose a bit or more, and when they should be more strict. And lastly, they tell us, it is better that you talk with your parents and argue with them, because it will loosen the chance that you will just sneak out at night. We think this is just the opposite. It will be in my case, but generally, we think that most of the time children are just not going to get the parents' argument because they don't have the capacity and they can't see the world outside. And we think they're going to be more mad that even though they showed why they think they are right, the parents just ignored it and still made them not do the thing they want. So let's talk about how is likely the children are going to understand the message they should be skeptical about parental authority, okay? Because we think that children in general has a very bad decision-making ability. Okay, we can see it. This is why we don't let them vote. This is why they can't drive. This is why they can't drink. This is why they can't have weapons. Because we think that maybe some of them are very, very smart. But in general, as a group, okay, and children have a bad ability to understand. Why? First of all, we think that a lot of them are not rational enough. Okay, we think that the decision-making process is still changing. The hormones making you think that the things are very, very important, even though they are not. We can see that they change hairstyle, food preferences, height, their body is changing all the time. It's very hard for them to really have the preferences and understanding in one time. It means that if a parent wants to argue with a child that he needs to go back on time from a party, a lot of time it will be hard for the children to actually be in this argument, understand the other side and agree with him even if he's right. Secondly, we think leaders don't really have a lot of experience in life. Because what does that mean? It means that a lot of situations that the parents know that they will probably, probably going to hurt them, like going with the kids who smokes, like going out late at night is going to hurt you in schools. A lot of time children, they don't really have a lot of point of references. And a lot of time their point of references are even bad from stories they heard in schools, from people who don't really care about them. It means that a lot of times they're just not going to believe their parents and they're going to argue with them more. Thirdly, there's a lot less self-control, okay? They don't really understand. A lot of the time, how the other people in class seems like the most important thing and you don't care and your parents don't understand and you have to do it right now. And we think that you will never be able to persuade a child in a rational manner. It's not that important. That in 2 years you're going to forget, or in a couple of months you're going to forget it. For him, right now, it's the most important thing. It means that more clashes, the children who are going to go into those arguments are going to hate more their parents. Because it's not, okay, I have to do it with my parents. I told him, I explained to him what is the most important, why I am right. He just laughed at me and made me stay at home and took my money and took my car and made me do it. We think this is how children are going to behave. This is how the most likely scenario is going to be. This is why it's going to be help to them. And we think that most of that, even if the teacher will choose good examples in class, and we talk about specific cases where it is good to talk to your parents or not, I think the children are a lot of time in an echo chamber. Most of the time, after the class, they're going to talk with each other. The more extreme children who already fought with their parents will tell them their stories and how they go over, and you should do the same when you're going to be the same thing. I think that this is the most likely message that they're going to get, and how it's actually going to affect their behavior for that child. Okay, but if your parent really is never able to explain their decisions to you, maybe you shouldn't listen to them. Maybe you should have those.
I really don't understand. Listen, I told you that in places where parents usually write about drugs, about staying late, about going with criminals, about smoking, a lot of places that it's inherently true that the parents will know better more than you what is good for you. Children are not going to listen to them. Secondly, what's going to help their bigger clashes? Because as we told you, every child has this specific point in their life that the parents taken away from them something that they want and they think it's the most important. It's your girl, it's the smoke, it's your friend, it's a party. It's the most important idea, and we think that today a lot of those clashes are they end in a grudge, but the children are just obeying and continuing their life and forgetting about it. We think that now, first of all, when you have the parents have to act a lot more aggressively by taking in house, by targeting him, to make sure that he doesn't do that. By taking down children, do that a lot worse to them. We think that a lot of them are just and a lot of they don't trust the parents anymore. That they can persuade them or talk to them. Other than we think that the only option is to leave their house. The only option is to disobey and move. The only option is to look at other authority figures that a lot of time are criminals or using drugs or getting more money, and we think that this will help them and their future. A lot of times because of one clash, their life might be ruined or getting worse. With the whole society, we have more people who go to drugs and criminals and people who do that state. Because the child of how it's really going to look like in the real life, and children are going to react to that. Please oppose. Thank you very much.
If I had to summarize this problem from the entire opposition bench in one sentence, it would be this. They want to make this debate about children that are obstinate, about children that are making problems, about children that act out. In that light, I don't understand why it is this thing that is doing making marginal change to the entirety of the opposition bench claiming. If you are such a good kid now, you don't smoke, you sleep at night again, you do all of these things, I don't get why a respectful discussion 1 hour a week with your teacher is all of a sudden going to make you start inhaling cigarettes and drinking every bottle of vodka every weekend. That's the problem with the entire problem. The people that make this debate about are the ones that are already a problem. The question then becomes, how can we deal with this problem in the best way? That is the extension one brings to you. Why this specifically is the best way to deal with the problem we are facing. I think that in a nutshell is why the government takes the debate today. I'm going to talk about two things. First, I'm going to talk about parent-child relationship, and then the second, I'm going to talk about education. On education, this is like less important. The analysis motivates you, explaining why even your education gets better, because you're more likely to listen in class, you have a better relationship with your parents, so you can go through your problem. Let's first start then on the class of parent-child relationship. Look, this is never a debate about the extreme cases. It was never a debate about abusive parents. It was never a debate about parents that love their children in intelligence. It's why I think the majority of responsibility of the government are really the parents saying that this is really what the debate is about. We agree this is more a debate about the moderates. And that's why I think Margaret gives you very meaningful important analysis of the debate. Because she explains why it is that even if you have a child that doesn't use heart, and even if you're a good parent, and even if you are overall a good parent, you're likely to make some mistakes. Because that's just the way the world works, right? My incentive is to win the debate. I'll probably make some stuff up along the way, but I still want to win the debate. Parents never go to school. They're never parenting school. They're never told, here's how you parent. There are no resources that exist on some books on parenting, I don't think parents are anyway, right? The analysis of what they do then is essentially a lot of things. The parents, first of all, love their children irrationally. That means they're likely to try and overbear, try and push their children to a lot of things they think might be better for their child, might not be better for their child in the long run. The second thing is that they feel pressure passed down traditions that their families have. Things like things you should say, ways you should speak, the kinds of people you should marry, the beliefs you should have, the opinions you should have about other people. Thirdly, that you should do that you think you want to be a good parent, you want to be perceived as a good parent, so you have the incentive to try and do things as parents traditionally are going to be good at doing, but that doesn't mean that's necessarily what your child needs. You might want to push your child to work hard, like maths, for example, because that's what you can make a successful job, and you love that, someone wants to see that child might hate that thing, right? You want to do something else. What is the analysis that one gives you why schools are better? The first thing is that schools regulate themselves, right? Schools have regulatory systems where teachers can get hired and fired, where parents go into school, go to the head, and say, look, this teacher taught my child this thing, this is really, really bad. That is why teachers don't have any incentive to be really, really bad. What we don't run around the house is giving a moderating mechanism to the monopoly that parents have over their children. I think we can all agree that parents make mistakes. I think what this mechanism does is it allows teachers to talk to children about how to approach those mistakes, right? How to fix those mistakes, how to make them better. What responses then do we get from their side? What responses then do we get on their side from this? They say that schools are probably going to be worse and teach more extreme things. I don't really get why. I think schools are far more likely to be moderate. Why? 3 reasons. One, they have the incentive to appeal to the most moderate of cases, because you have cases on either side of the spectrum, right? Really good parents and really bad parents. 2, school curricula are voted on. That means that you don't want people to be angry about the kinds of things that you're teaching. 3, you don't want parents to complain about you, and there as a result they have the incentive to teach them good things. Let's then talk about the cases that we heard from their side. And I want to start by taking out the closing opposition extension immediately, right? Because their entirety of their argument was things like children are irrational, there is an echo chamber in school, they lack self-control. All of these are reasons why we should teach them to have that self-control in discussions with their parents. That is the big response we have to closing opposition. That their argument literally explains the problem with the status quo, and I think Martha is the one that explains to you why teachers can teach kids how to moderate discussions, how to talk to their parents respectfully, how to not shout at them, how to achieve your end goals, and most importantly, how to accept when your parents are right. Note that the classes also have Q&A sessions. You could go to your teacher and say, I have this problem, I don't like what's happening, what should I do? That is where your teacher can advise you on the issue. Note that opening opposition and closing opposition both concede the fact that even the most troublesome of kids will be listening in these classes to an extent because all of their harms stem from that, right? I think that is the main issue with them. Before I move on, I'll take over. Yeah.
Best case scenario here is that some 15-year-olds drink more. One point in our case which beats that is that parents don't have the respect for teachers to have typical conversations about developmental issues like dyslexia at crucial ages.
No, I think you responded to that case yourself when you said parents have the best interests of their child at heart. Panel, if parents have the best interests of their child at heart, I don't understand how they're going to be as bad as opening government, as opening opposition say that they will, right? Because the majority of the harm stem from the idea that parents and teachers are going to be at odds with one another and argue. If that is the case, I don't see why that is going to happen, given that parents want to do what's best for their child, and arguing with the teacher isn't what's best for their child, right? That is the main problem that I have with their case. But the other thing to finally deal with the parent-child thing is that their entire case in opening opposition is based on the breakdown of respect that they never conclusively prove. That is not inherent to teaching children this. I think when I was at the house, you teach children how to be more respectful to their parents. The impact of our extension cannot be understated. One, I think what you get is just better relationships with your parents. You can approach them for problems. You can deal with them better. Two, you become a better parent yourself in the long run. So this problem fixes itself. Because when you learn how to deal with your parents as a child, when you then become a parent, you are far more aware of the incentives that children have and how to deal with them as a parent. So in 30 to 40 years, we might even not need this anymore. These are the reasons why these are the reasons why we take a parent-child relationship. Really on education though, I think that we prove why education gets better in our side as well. Given that you have a better parent-child relationship, you can go to your parents about your problems much more, and you have more open communication. So I think we've proven that something closing opposition don't respond to at all. I think it's a bit late to go with. That they're willing to take out certain things that have been made about education so far. The one main thing I want to say is that they assume this is going to be taught very, very badly, right? Because they essentially say that communication is going to break down with parents and there's going to be anger. I don't think parents are going to blame teachers because first of all, it's the school curriculum, it's not the teacher's fault, but also secondly, you want what's best for your child. So you have the incentive to go to these meetings anyway. You have the incentive to learn about your child, learn what's wrong, and try and help fix it. I don't think pettiness is going to undercut that, and they never prove why on opposition bench. I am so proud to propose.
Alright, I thank God for it. I now invite our speaker opposition.
Either Israel is really different than any other place in the world, or CG is lying when they tell you we only talk about experiences. Because from how I view this world, every child has a relationship with the parent. In every child's life, there are many times that they disagree about the fundamental stuff with their parents. And we think that most of the time, those children are wrong. Because of all of the reasons that I told you about. Because children don't really understand reality in the best way. And they think that it's mostly keep the children still doing the right thing and not escalating the situation or making more decisions. It's only the thing that bypass the irrationality by bigger irrationality. And because they don't, this bigger irrationality, parental authority. The only way to keep the child obeyed, the only way to make them not screw up their entire life is using this thing and to show you why this thing is otherwise dysfunction. This is why you use this. Two reasons my speech. Firstly, how this motion really affects the reality, and therefore what cases really sensitive and what cases don't. Secondly, what are the consequences of not listening to our parents, of less parental authority, and why is that effect? Let's think about really different. Because how does this motion affect? think that opening house have very clear organization on both of the sides. OG mainly talks about why we only question your parents, have beautiful discussions with them, and therefore we will progress as person and be more Second, you will never listen to your parents, the parents will abuse of children in many cases, the parents won't want to do homework, they won't want to listen to the teachers, they won't want any authority to anyone. They can do none of those things, actually analyze how those things are connected to this motion and why they actually come to being. So even if you buy some of the harms from, let's say, they are dependent on the fact that those things are actually going to happen from motion, the motion is not going to act as OG things. So what did I actually explain to you? He rebutted the directive, he used the systemic mechanism to the main claim of OG. The main claim was, it will be a rational discussion, it will listen to the reasons of the parents, therefore they will be convinced of it by the parents. What did I highlight? It tells you that the first thing, children are most likely to be more extreme in general. They're most likely not being able to get the right decisions, they are irrational, they have hormones, they all have to stop, they make them be irrational in many decisions. Secondly, they lack experience, so they don't know if a certain thing in 1 week or 2 years really better works for them, so they are not able to make most of the decisions. This also applies when they are 16 years old. Thirdly, we think that they are walking on short-term biases. They want to have the things right now, they have urges, they walk through those urges. When CG, the only thing that they answer to us is we will teach them to set up the form of discussion. We think that obviously we want to do those things as well. We want to do teach them how to negotiate, we want to teach them how to do stuff. It is irrelevant to the motion, just want the consequence to be most time you should listen to your parents. Most time your parental authority is the right thing to do, and not you should question and actually go against your parents as OG told us. So those things are symmetrical, but those dimensions that I told you are still relevant. Because in heated emotional discussions, most people act on those stuff and not on the stuff that they were taught in debating in school. So, what does that mean? That means that we think that the OO tells you, what is OO response to OG? Parents don't have the time to explain everything to the children. We think that it's obvious to do in many cases, but on the extreme cases, the cases that are most important to children, the big questions, obviously parents want to explain them in many cases, and we answer the most convincing cases by OG, why even of those scenarios, we still win because the children will still be irrational. What does that mean? The all of the damages that come from the fact that children don't listen to parents, many things like all of the stuff, only happen because of this analysis, and we are all on that level. Let's talk about the consequences. So first of all, either schools better than teachers or better than parents or all of the stuff. So we don't think this is like a big thing in this debate, because obviously both schools and parents have a huge impact on the children's life on both sides of the house. We don't know why, let's say the bias in speech will make more impact on this side of the house. So the second thing to say, that obviously, high school, schools in many cases are more likely than the parents, because they have to deal with multiple children. We don't think there are more nuances about schools dealing with children, especially about safety and what government wants to do. So what does the CG tell you? They say that the parents are wrong, and OG tell us. Parents are wrong for many reasons, therefore we want to counterbalance the wrongness of the parents. Why is not relevant in this debate? Because we say that it's saying to the children to think otherwise. The fact that even schools show other narrative, that does not mean that the parents act in a different way. If you really that is important to the parents, because of what Peter tries to say, because it's the basic value system, we think the parents should still act in the same way, just prevent the children from leading to the power or something like that. We don't think that they have any impact on this debate because of this motion. So, what I highlighted that you want specifically that, the relationship between parents and children. So let's first handle the CG case about those relationships. Because what they tell you, when there is no negotiations, big clashes happen and big fights. We think that this is a wrong utilization of status quo. First of all, specifically parental authority means that there is no clash, there is no thing that goes out and if this parental authority is effective. Because then you just believe your parents because you think that they are right because you are parents. This is what parental authority means. But secondly, we think that because before it collapses, we think it's more likely that even on their side of the house, people will outside the house, people will still talk to our parents, negotiations, some children won't want to talk before they leave the house. We think that therefore that the interesting place is where those reactions and reversing happens more often. Before I get to that, why we win this debate and we take seconds.
Your entire case is predicated on those children that right now don't even voice their concerns to their parents.
how then does that lead to big clashes, arguments,
No, we
and
completely
destructive
don't
conversations?
think that this is the case. We think that today children talk to their parents, but mostly are eventually convinced by the parental authority. The thing is, while it's not like only the extreme cases, because there is a spectrum of how much children are willing to accept parental authority. What we can show you is just move this spectrum to not accepting more parental authority, which means that more and more children are going to be in a situation where it's most important to convince them they are not going to be convinced. What does it mean? It means there are many voices decisions. It means that in many cases the pressure becomes so big that you have to get into other things which are mostly peer pressure, which are mostly other authority figures, that in most cases are much worse for their life. You think it is not extreme because every child has this relationship with their parents. It's not only about the biggest stuff. Therefore, the likelihood that this relationship become huge is the most important thing. It's very because it applies to everyone. Let's compare it briefly all. You think that it's not like there are many cases about this, that the fact that the parents are not going to listen to the teacher. It was already debunked by CG, that the parents probably like to know that the child has dyslexia or something like this. We think that therefore the impact of that is much more stronger when we talk about the fact that it actually makes the child's life to go to hell, that it screws up on a big thing like doing drugs, that they think that the wrong decision with the big decision, unlike the fact that in most cases the parents are still going to think about the child of the most preferable way. For one of those reasons, please oppose the motion. Thank you.
All speakers, you may stand up.